Part 3. We've already established that this Canoe and Kayak Club has nothing to do with canoeing or kayaking,
referring to the group as it existed between 2010 and 2012.
so it stands to reason that maybe they care more about advocacy, environmental issues, or community service, right? Well, let's talk about advocacy for a moment. Back in 2010, Nestle started drilling test wells around the Wannabes Springs with the ultimate goal of pumping out millions of gallons of water each day to bottle and sell. Did I mention that the Wannabes River is the most beautiful river in the area? Anyway, the local community was split between the few landowners who stood to gain bucket loads of money for leasing their water rights versus everyone else, especially those who cared about the river. And back in 2010, this was one of the top local issues that had a direct impact on paddlers in the area. So did the club make any effort to send delegates to public meetings to speak on its behalf? Nope. Did the club raise money in support of the opposition? You know, the side that wasn't backed by a $130 billion corporation? Nope. Did the club even bother to take a symbolic stance on the issue? Nope. The club did absolutely nothing. On the other hand, being a member of ACKC apparently does allow you to attach a qualifier to your name when you attend any sort of public hearing. So, hypothetically, when you say a few words at a public hearing, you do so as a proud member of the Appalachia Canoe and Kayak Club. And this sounds a lot better than being just some random scrub off the streets, and it might even lend extra credibility to whatever you're saying. You can pretend to the rest of the world that you represent a group that actually does things, one that cares about the environment, a group with some influence. That is, unless you're talking to anyone who knows that in reality the group does nothing but meet once a month for dinner. This is all hypothetical, of course. Hypothetically. Alright, so advocacy clearly isn't this group's strong point. Let's talk civic duty and environmental awareness. On weekends back when I was active in this group, I was either off racing somewhere or else I was on the Upper Ocklawakanee River picking up trash. Now, I don't have many pictures from this time because honestly I wasn't too interested in taking pictures of bagged trash, but I'll show you a few of the hauls, and unfortunately these are some of the less impressive ones. Anyway, the landings were the most littered, so that's where I spent most of my time. Once I'd worked my way through the landings, I'd do float trips, kayaking my larger boat and pulling the smaller one behind me as a trash barge. Now, since I was active in the paddling group, I announced these cleanups just about every month. I'm going to be at Iron Bridge at 10 a.m. on Saturday. I've got bags to spare, gloves if you want them, enough bug spray for the whole group, and a ton of reach extenders. Come on out if you want to help clean up the landing. Can you guess how many people from ACKC over the course of a year and a half came to any of these cleanups? If your guess was greater than 0, then you're very wrong, and you obviously haven't been paying attention to what I've been saying. Don't you remember? ACKC does absolutely nothing besides meet for dinner once a month. I even organized 2 float trip cleanups, and by this I don't mean the ones where I was just out on my own cleaning up trash. I mean ones where I put together a trip for people to come and clean up trash with me as I was pulling the trash barge. And again, not a single person from the club was interested. But you know who did help? Local racers and people who learned about the events through Keep Tallahassee Beautiful. As time went on, I became a bit more ambitious with cleanups, despite the complete lack of support from ACKC. I mean, it's hard to explain, but it just seemed comical after the 3rd or 4th month. It was like, seriously, none of you are coming out? Come on, really? Alright then. However, there were in fact 2 ACKC members who each came to one of what I'm going to call the 3 capstone cleanups. So a big thank you to the 2 of you. But it was pretty obvious that these weren't your typical kind of ACKC members, and they came out despite the club, not because of it. The first of these capstone cleanups was a boat that had floated downriver during a flood, flipped, and gotten stuck on a couple of fallen trees. It had been there for years and become a sort of landmark. After a quick evaluation, I came back with supplies and patched the small holes in the hull. I cleared tree limbs and debris, and I braced one of the trees with the lumber I'd floated down the river. The idea was to secure the boat, use a chainsaw to cut the roots it was sitting on, and then flip the boat back onto the river where it could be floated out. And that's exactly what we did, a handful of us with a rented pole chainsaw and a ton of rope. We paddled, poled, dragged, and pushed that boat up the river to the landing, and it was glorious. Following a pointless month-long wait, the boat was impounded by the state and disposed of. Good riddance. The second was a Dodge Magnum that some idiot had driven into the river during a rainstorm a few years back. The guy thankfully made it out fine, but his car floated about 100 yards before coming to rest at the edge of a drop. At low water, you could just barely see the top of the car, but thankfully the rivers were down in mid-2011, so it seemed like a good time to work on it. A handful of people showed up for the endeavor, including a girl who was on alligator patrol. Now our goal was to get the car off the tree and pull it up to the landing, but there were a few problems. First off, the car was halfway buried in sand and full of silt. Second, the tree roots were in the way. And third was the drop. The car was already completely ruined, so we decided to secure the car first, clear all of the sand and as much silt as we could, roll the car into shallower water, clear the rest of the silt, and then go from there. And that's exactly what we did. The car had belonged to a computer repair specialist, and we recovered the computer parts and debris that were strewn all over the bottom of the river. I found a pair of jumper cables that I cleaned up and still use to this day. It took us most of the day just to flip the car, so we decided to stop and pick up the following weekend. During that week, someone decided to steal the tires for some reason, and the car surprisingly made it onto the news. I mean, the car had been there for years, everyone knew it was there, you could practically see it from the landing, but now, for whatever reason, it was on the news. So anyway, the owner learned about it, took full responsibility, and paid for a tow truck to come out and finish the job we'd started, so mission accomplished. Third was another motorboat that had sunk and filled with silt, and again, this one was visible from a bridge and had been completely ignored by state agencies. I spent an afternoon excavating it, and the following weekend, the ACKC member I mentioned earlier came out to try and help me with it. We just about killed ourselves with his hand winch, and were barely able to move the boat, so we reconvened a week later. He got in touch with some good old boy friends of his, and they were just dying for an excuse to use their semi-aquatic ATVs. And man, that was a blast. Despite some pricey mechanical issues and the boat ripping in half, we eventually got the boat, with all of its parts, up to the highway, and we were able to dispose of it. No thanks to either the Leon Sheriff's Office or the FWC. So altogether, we had saved the state of Florida tens of thousands of dollars and had a great time doing it. Where was ACKC during all of this? Psh, your guess is as good as mine. But I think there's definitely a trend here, and we'll pick up with even more ACKC in action in Part 4. Thanks for watching.